The relationship between the U.S. and Iran has always been fraught with tension, but in recent years, the conflict has reached new heights. From the early days of the Iranian Revolution to the ongoing nuclear standoff, the two countries have been locked in a battle of geopolitical influence, with both sides increasingly flexing their military muscles. The stakes have never been higher, and the U.S.-Iran rivalry has become one of the most dangerous global conflicts today. As Iran's nuclear ambitions continue to grow and the U.S. military prepares for potential escalation, the question on everyone's mind is, what's really at stake? The roots of this conflict go back to 1979, when the Islamic Revolution in Iran overthrew the U.S.-backed Shah and established the Islamic Republic under Ayatollah Khomeini. This event severed diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Iran and set the stage for a series of confrontations, most notably over Iran's nuclear program. For decades, the U.S. has imposed sanctions, isolated Iran diplomatically, and used military power to curb Iran's influence in the region. Despite these efforts, Iran has continued to expand its military capabilities, including developing ballistic missiles and proxy forces across the Middle East, which has only intensified tensions with the U.S. In 2015, the Iran nuclear deal was signed, temporarily easing tensions by limiting Iran's nuclear activities in exchange for sanctions relief. However, when President Trump pulled the U.S. out of the agreement in 2018, it reignited a dangerous cycle of escalation. Since then, both nations have engaged in a series of provocations and military posturing. The U.S. has increased its military presence in the Persian Gulf, sending aircraft carriers, bombers, and defense systems to deter potential Iranian threats. In response, Iran has tested new missiles, ramped up support for proxy militias, and undertaken cyber attacks on U.S. assets, all while continuing to expand its nuclear program. One of the key points of contention in this ongoing standoff is the military balance between the two nations. The U.S. military, particularly the U.S. Navy, maintains a dominant presence in the region. With nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and missile defense systems that can intercept incoming threats from long distances, the U.S. military has the edge in terms of power projection. The USS Nimitz, USS Abraham Lincoln, and other carriers are not just powerful warships. They are floating command centers capable of launching airstrikes, conducting surveillance, and serving as a visible deterrent to Iranian aggression. Despite the U.S. military's superiority, Iran's growing missile capabilities remain a significant threat. Iran has developed a series of advanced anti-ship missiles and ballistic missiles capable of targeting U.S. naval assets, including aircraft carriers, from a distance. The DF-21D anti-ship ballistic missile, in particular, is one of the most feared weapons in Iran's arsenal, as it is specifically designed to strike and destroy large, slow-moving targets like aircraft carriers. While the U.S. military's missile defense systems are state-of-the-art, the reality is that Iran's missiles are getting more accurate, and their growing capabilities could put the U.S. Navy in greater danger. But the military balance isn't the only factor in this conflict. The nuclear issue remains the central flashpoint. Iran's nuclear ambitions have long been a source of tension, with the U.S. and its allies fearing that Iran's eventual development of nuclear weapons could lead to a destabilization of the Middle East. Iran's nuclear program, although claimed to be for peaceful purposes, is seen by many as a direct challenge to global non-proliferation efforts. The prospect of a nuclear-armed Iran has led the U.S. to pursue a policy of maximum pressure, imposing harsh sanctions in hopes of forcing Iran to abandon its nuclear program. However, these sanctions have only deepened the rift between the two countries, with Iran continuing to enrich uranium and develop technologies that could lead to the creation of nuclear weapons. A nuclear-armed Iran would shift the balance of power in the Middle East. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Israel, and others would feel the need to respond to this new threat. Israel in particular has made it clear that it will not allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons, and Israel's military has reportedly prepared plans to strike Iran's nuclear facilities if necessary. A military confrontation between Israel and Iran could have catastrophic consequences, not just for the region, but for global security as well. The situation is made even more volatile by the proxy wars that Iran has been involved in throughout the Middle East. Iran supports militias in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and Iraq, and its influence extends to key conflict zones in the region. These proxy groups provide Iran with a way to exert influence without direct military confrontation. But they also complicate the U.S. military's efforts to counter Iran's influence. The U.S. has been involved in a series of military operations to target Iranian-backed militias. But these efforts have led to a cyclical escalation of violence, with Iran retaliating through attacks on U.S. personnel and military installations. The most dangerous aspect of the U.S.-Iran standoff is the potential for miscalculation. Both nations are involved in high-stakes diplomacy and military posturing, with the risk of an accidental escalation into a full-scale conflict always looming. The use of military force, particularly in the form of airstrikes, cyber attacks, or drone strikes, could quickly escalate into something much larger, with dire consequences for the Middle East and beyond. The stakes in this conflict are high. For the U.S., failure to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran could lead to the destabilization of the entire Middle East, threatening allied nations and global trade. For Iran, it is a matter of sovereignty and self-determination, with the Iranian leadership seeking to break free from what it sees as an unjust system of global sanctions and international isolation. So, what's at stake in the U.S.-Iran standoff? The future of the Middle East, the balance of power, and perhaps even the global order depend on how this rivalry plays out. Will diplomacy prevail, or will the world witness another military conflict in one of the world's most volatile regions? Only time will tell, but the consequences of this conflict will be felt across the globe for generations to come.